Karma Yoga, action in Krishna consciousness. Text 20. Na praharasiyat priyam prapya nod vijet prapya kapriyam sthira buddhir asamuddho brahmabhid brahmani sthita. A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something unpleasant nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, and who knows the signs of God, is already situated in transcendence. The symptoms of the self-realized persons are given herein. The first symptom is that he is not illusioned by the false identification of the body with his true self. He knows perfectly well that he is not this body, but is the fragmental portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is therefore not joyful in achieving something, nor does he lament in losing anything which is related to his body. Thus, this steadiness of mind is called sthira buddhi or self-intelligence. He is therefore never bewildered by mistaking the gross body for the soul, nor does he accept the body as permanent and disregard the existence of the soul. This knowledge elevates him to the station of knowing the complete science of the absolute truth, namely Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan. He thus knows his constitutional position perfectly well, without falsely trying to become one with the Supreme in all aspects. This is called Brahman realization or self-realization. Such steady consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. Text 21. Banya parasveva asaktatma vindati atmani yat sukham sa brahma yoga yuktatma sukham aksayam asnute. Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. Sri Jamunacharya, a great devotee in Krishna consciousness, said, Yad avadhi mama seta Krishna papadara vinde nava rasa dhamani udhyatam rantum asit tad avadhi bata nari sangame smarya bhavati mukha vikara susthu nistivanam ka. Since I have been engaged in the transcendental loving service of Krishna, realizing ever new pleasure in him, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought, and my lips curl with distaste. A person in Brahma Yoga or Krishna consciousness is so absorbed in the loving service of the Lord that he loses his taste for material sense pleasure altogether. This highest pleasure in terms of matter is sex pleasure. The whole world is moving under its spell, and materials cannot work at all without this motivation. But a person engaged in Krishna consciousness can work with greatest vigor without sex pleasure, which he avoids. This is a test in spiritual realization. Spiritual realization and sex pleasure go ill together. A Krishna conscious person is not attracted to any kind of sense pleasure due to his being a liberated soul. Text 22. Yehi samsparsha jabhoga dukkha yonaya evate adi antavanta kaunteya na tesu ramate buddha. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. Material sense pleasures are due to the contact of the material senses, which are all temporary because the body itself is temporary. A liberated soul is not interested in anything which is temporary. Knowing well the joys of transcendental pleasures, how can a liberated soul agree to enjoy false pleasure? In the Padma Purana it is said, Ramante yogino nande satyanande sit atmani iti rama padanesu param brahma vidiyate. The mystics derive unlimited transcendental pleasures from the absolute truth, and therefore the supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, is known as Rama. In Srimad Bhagavatam also 5.5.1 it is said, Nayam deho dehe bhajam nar loke kastan kaman arhate vid bhujam ye tapo divyam putraka yana satvam suddhet yasmad brahma saukham tab anantam. My dear sons, there is no reason to labor very hard for sense pleasure while in this human form of life such pleasures are available to the stool eaters, hogs. Rather, you should undergo penances in this life by which your existence will be purified, and as a result you will be able to enjoy unlimited transcendental bliss. Therefore, those who are true yogis or learned transcendentalists are not attracted by sense pleasure, which are the causes of continuous material existence. The more one is addicted to material pleasures, the more he is trapped by material miseries. Text 23. Saknoti haiva ya sodhum prak sarira vimoksanat karma krodho bhavam vegam sa yukta sa sukhi nara. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world. If one wants to make steady progress on the path of self-realization, he must try to control the forces of the material senses. There are the forces of talk, forces of anger, forces of mind, forces of stomach, forces of the genitals, and the forces of the tongue. One who is able to control the forces of all these different senses and the mind is able to control, and the mind is called Goswami or Swami. Such Goswamis live strictly controlled lives and forego altogether the forces of the senses. Material desires, when unsatiated, generate anger, and thus the mind, eyes, and chest become agitated. Therefore, one must practice to control them before one gives up this material body. One who can do this is understood to be self-realized and is thus happy in the state of self-realization. It is the duty of the transcendentalist to try continuously to control desire and anger. Text 24. Yo nata sukha natar aramas tathantar jyotir eva ya sa yogi brahma nirvanam brahma bhuto didhigachati. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. Unless one is able to relish happiness from within, how can one retire from the eternal engagements meant for deriving superficial happiness? A liberated person enjoys happiness by factual experience. He can therefore sit silently at any place and enjoy the activities of life from within. Such a liberated person no longer desires external material happiness. This state is called Brahma Bhuta, attaining which one is assured of going back to Godhead, back to home. Text 25. Labhante Brahma Nirvanam Rasaya Kisina Kakalmasa China Vaida Yatatmana Sarva Bhuta Hite Rata. Those who are beyond the dualities that rise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. Only a person who is fully in Krishna consciousness can be said to be engaged in welfare work for all living entities. When a person is actually in the knowledge that Krishna is the fountainhead of everything, that when he acts in that spirit, he acts for everyone. The sufferings of humanity are due to the forgetfulness of Krishna as the supreme enjoyer, the supreme proprietor, and the supreme friend. Therefore, to act to revive this consciousness within the entire human society is the highest welfare work. One cannot be engaged in such first-class welfare work without being liberated in the Supreme. A Krishna conscious person has no doubt about the supremacy of Krishna. He has no doubt because he is completely freed from all sins. This is the state of divine love. A person engaged only in ministering to the physical welfare of human society cannot factually help anyone. Temporary relief of the external body and the mind is not satisfactory. The real cause of one's difficulty is the hard struggle for life, may be found in one's forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Lord. When a man is fully conscious of his relationship with Krishna, he is actually a liberated soul, although he may be in the material tabernacle. Text 26. Kama Krodha Vimuktanam Yatinam Yata Setasam Abhito Brahma Nirvanam Vartate Vidita Mamanam. Those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. Of the saintly persons who are constantly engaged in striving towards salvation, one who is in Krishna consciousness is the best of all. The Bhagavatam 4.22.39 confirms this fact as follows. Yat pada pankaja palasa vilasa bhaktaya karmasayam grathitam udgathayanti santa tadvanna rikta matayo yatayopi ruddha sotoganatam aranam bhaja vasudevam. Just try to worship in devotional service Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even great sages are not able to control the forces of the senses as effectively as those who are engaged in transcendental bliss by serving the lotus feet of the Lord, uprooting the deep-grown desire for fruitive activities. In the conditioned soul, the desire to enjoy the fruitive results of work is so deep-rooted that it is very difficult even for the great sages to control such desires despite great endeavors. A devotee of the Lord, constantly engaged in devotional service in Krishna consciousness, perfect in self-realization, very quickly attains liberation in the Supreme, owing to his complete knowledge in self-realization. He remains in trance. To cite an analogous example of this, darsana dhyana samsparsaya matsakurma vihangama swani apatyani pusnanti tathaham api padmaja. By vision, by meditation, and by touch only do the fish, the tortoise, and the birds maintain their offspring. Similarly do I also, O Padmaja. The fish brings up its offspring simply by looking at them. The tortoise brings up its offspring simply by meditation. The eggs of the tortoise are laid on hand, and the tortoise meditates on the eggs while in the water. Similarly, the devotee in Krishna consciousness, although far away from the Lord's abode, can elevate himself to that abode simply by thinking of him constantly. By engagement in Krishna consciousness, he does not feel the pangs of material miseries. This state of life is called Brahma Nirvana, or the absence of the material miseries due to being constantly immersed in the Supreme. Text 27 and 28. Sparsan kritva bahir bhavyams kaksus kaivanta tare brabhu prana panau samau kritva nasa bhyantara karinau yatendriya manobuddhir munir moksha parayana vigatatechha bhayo krodha yat sada mukta evasa. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, intelligence, the transcendentalist aim at liberation, becomes free from desire, fear, anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. Being engaged in Krishna consciousness, one can immediately understand one's spiritual identity, and then one can understand the material Lord by means of devotional service. When one is well situated in devotional service, one comes to the transcendental position, qualified to feel the presence of the Lord in the sphere of one's activity. This particular position is called liberation in the Supreme. After explaining the above principles of liberation in the Supreme, the Lord gives instruction to Arjuna as to how one can come to that position by practice of the mysticism or yoga known as Ashtanga Yoga, which is divisible into an eightfold procedure called Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. In the 6th chapter, the subject of the yoga is explicitly detailed, and at the end of 5th, it is only preliminarily explained. One has to drive out the sense objects such as sound, touch, form, taste and smell by the Pratyahara process in yoga, and then keep the vision of the eyes between the two eyebrows and concentrate on the tip of the nose with half closed lids. There is no benefit in closing the eyes together, because then there is every chance of falling asleep. Nor is there benefit in opening the eyes completely, because then there is a hazard of being attracted by sense objects. The breathing movement is restrained within the nostrils by neutralizing the up moving and down moving air within the body. By practice of such yoga, one is able to gain control over the senses, refrain from outward sense objects, and thus prepare oneself for the liberation in the Supreme. This yoga process helps one become free from all kinds of fear and anger, and thus feel the presence of the Super Soul in the transcendental situation. In other words, Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of executing yoga principles. This will be thoroughly explained in the next chapter. A Krishna conscious person, however, being always engaged in devotional service, does not risk losing his senses in some other engagement. This is a better way of controlling the senses than by Ashtanga Yoga.